Good evening. We are back together again for our study in the parables of Jesus, and we are joined tonight, Will Mahan from Highland Park, and Travis Creasy from Riverside Christian Academy and Riverside Church of Christ, and Bryce Millison from Ohio. So Bryce, which is church are you at this point? I can't remember the name.
I attend New Concord Church of Christ.
New Concord Church of Christ. And if you've ever watched any of the Ben and Travis videos, at least the last couple of years, those at Highland Park some of you guys have helped film those and been in those. Bryce is our cameraman and producer and pretty much the guy who works the magic with all of those videos. So we appreciate Bryce hanging out with us for a little bit as we study tonight. Matthew chapter 5 is where we're going to be at. And that may sound odd because usually we don't think about parables in Matthew chapter 5. It's the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus has basically just gotten started with it. He talks about all of the blessings. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit and pure in heart and all those different things. And then he talks about a couple of things beginning in verse 13. And we're going to read this together. And as I said, it's not maybe necessarily a parable, but he uses some things very similar that he does when he does parables. And so I think you'll understand the connection. And we're just going to talk about these things for just a few minutes. So, Bryce, if you wouldn't mind, kick us off by reading Matthew chapter 5, 13 through 16.
All right, reading from the New King James. Number 13, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? Is it then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men? You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven.
All right. So as we've looked at the parables up until this point, most of them have said something along the lines of the kingdom of heaven is like. Now, he hasn't really gotten that far into his ministry in Matthew chapter 5. And so he doesn't say anything about the kingdom of heaven is like, but he does say, you are the salt of the earth and you are the light of the world. And as we've thought about the kingdom, as we've studied about the kingdom up until this point with parables, we understand that the kingdom is what? It's the church. So it's us. So when he says you are the salt of the earth and you are the light of the world, there is a bit of a parable thought here because he's trying to connect us to something in the world that we can understand. Travis, why don't you tell us a little bit about the things that he connects us to, or some thoughts on what he connects those of us who are a part of the body?
Well, I think this is another occasion. You look at John 8, verse 12, where Jesus says, I am the light of the world. And so that's a connection there that we, eventually they would understand that we're the body of Christ. And so, we have a responsibility at all times, and especially when life is at its darkest moments, to be a light. Think about when I was in the hospital, woke up and I would listen to Johnny Cash, my mother's hymn book. And one of the songs, I think this is one of your favorites, Ben, is Let the Lower Lights Be Burning, and so you've got the upper light, which is God, the big light, but then the lower lights help people see where the shore is. And so, but I think, a really cool thing I've heard about this passage is that it could have possibly been around the time of the Feast of Tabernacles, which is a Hebrew feast that for that week, they build little huts to remind them of when they were in the wilderness. And so there's a possibility that they're in the midst of a festival where, when he talks about you're the light of the world, if it was the right time of day or night, he could have looked out and said, you are the light of the world. And you would see these little huts throughout the countryside that had little lights in them, which, would be an amazing illustration and perfect timing. Obviously, Jesus is perfect on his delivery there, but that's just something that's kind of cool. And then, as we follow Jesus, Jesus tells us that, the world hated him, and therefore they're going to hate us. And so, they tried to bury the light. I mean, Jesus is the light of the world. They tried to bury him, but he wouldn't stay buried, and he wouldn't stay in the tomb. And so that's all kinds of meat on the bone there, as far as looking at, ways in which we're going to be like Christ. We're buried with him in baptism, and we'll raise with him to walk in newness of life on 2 occasions, right? In this life we raise from baptism, and then the next we will.
Yeah, and of course he also talks a little bit not just about the light here, but he talks about the salt. Will, you want to cash in any on the light or on the salt here?
Yeah, we've been studying the Sermon on the Mount with the youth group, over the past little bit. And one thing that was interesting when I was looking at some stuff on, salt, of course, it was used in that day and time, and probably in a lot of third world countries now, to preserve meat, to preserve food, and then almost, a flavoring agent that we talk about now. But one thing that was really interesting that I was looking at is salt is useless unless it has something to be put on. And the guy that I was kind of getting the study from and kind of reading some of his thoughts said, if you have salt on on a table, and you have some McDonald's fries on a table, the salt does no good unless it's put on the fries. And I've always thought, now that's kind of interesting as a Christian, that if I'm not actually in connection with people and trying to reach people, then what good am I to Jesus? Because Jesus gave me a challenge to carry his mission to every person that I meet. So if I'm the salt of the earth, then I'm trying to make people better. I think, Lindsay, my wife, whenever we go to the Mexican restaurant, she coats the chips with salt. Just covers it to where it's like, I'll get my own basket because she loves it that much. And we look at that and we go, man, salt makes things better. So as a Christian, am I someone that's making the people around me better? And I know we've talked about week in and week out, when we look at these parables and when we look at the words of Jesus, hey, it's the mirror for me to look in my life. And when I look at that salt, I go, one, am I willing to connect myself to people? But then take it a step further and go, when I'm connected to them, are they walking away with a better relationship with God because of me? And I don't know, I can be the first in that line to go, man, I don't know that I do, the job that Jesus wants me to be doing, so it's kind of a challenge to me to go, man, are my relationships helping the people, that they're with grow closer to Jesus? And he says, if it's lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out, and so I want my life to be, when Jesus looks at it, to go, man, he's doing what I've called him to do. And I don't have to worry about casting him, out to the side.
Yeah, I was thinking about Romans chapter 12 with this too, because I had a note in my Bible that, salt is used for flavoring. Mm-hmm. Like you said, it's used for preserving things. And it's also used as an offering in Leviticus chapter 2 and verse 13, Numbers chapter 18 and verse 19. So it's kind of got 3 purposes, at least in that day and time. We don't use it as an offering necessarily anymore. We don't often use it as a preservative anymore, but Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, we're all pretty familiar with. Therefore, I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is the will of God, what is the good and acceptable and perfect will. So you think about, in terms of the, us being the sacrifice, us being something like, I think that goes along with what you said, Will, the connecting us to, we're going to be around the world. We don't want the world to influence us and lose the flavor, the savor that we have. But at the same time, we're supposed to be influencing the world. We're supposed to be making that connection to them to help make a positive impact on them.
I think it's interesting too that Jesus uses something like salt and then even a lamp. In the big scheme of things, both of those are so insignificant. You know, when you look at a piece of salt, if you spill it, you go, okay, I'm gonna brush it off on the floor. You look at a lamp and go, okay, it's not really doing that much, you know, compared to a spotlight and all these other things. But what you're saying is, if we as Christians would stop relying on, you know, 5 or 6 other people to make all the difference, and all of us would join in, we can make a huge difference. You know, because the one piece of salt is not going to make, you know, Lindsay very happy on the chip, but if she dumps, you know, half the thing on it, it's going to make all the difference. And it's the same way with the lamp. You know, one lamp may not shine extremely bright in the world, but if the whole church as a whole started shining their light and going, hey, we're going to affect the world for good, we're going to change what they look like, man, I mean, you start a movement that can't be, you know, what Travis said, it can't be buried, because it's so significant now, because insignificant things have made it huge. And so I think a lot of times we get discouraged because going, man, I'm just one person. But if one person will do their part and everybody will follow suit, then, I mean, we can make a change, you know, more drastic than what we could ever imagine.
Yeah, Bryce, you got some things to add to that?
There's no anything that's coming to my mind right now, but I'll let you guys chime in.
I think you make a point there. I think that he goes into next about the comparison game. You know, he says, well, I've come to fulfill the law.
Right.
Which most people would go, well, that's impossible. Nobody can fulfill the law. He does it. And then he goes on to talk about the Pharisees, right? He says, you know, your righteousness must surpass that. You know, I'm thinking, if I'm regular Joe Schmo out in the crowd, I'm thinking that's impossible too.
Yeah.
Well, it's impossible outside of Jesus. So, you know, Jesus justifies us and he sanctifies us, and we rise. You know, we don't have to be perfect because he is. Mm-hmm. But if we're in Christ, our righteousness already surpasses that of the Pharisees. You know, because it's not based on how perfect we are. It's about what you're talking about. The group effort might be the word.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting, and maybe this is in my, you know, my personal life and everything. Satan's incredible at discouraging you and making you doubt yourself. You know, by stepping back and going, man, what can I really do as a person? And there's a lot of times, you know, we've got 49 kids in our youth group here at Highland Park. And I just go, to try and reach those 49 seems impossible. You know, and I look at that and I go, you know, and everybody wants to pull out numbers games, and we've all heard it and seen it. And you really start to think, what difference am I really making, you know, in the lives of other people? But you look at what Jesus did. You know, I kind of think Jesus impacted 12 people drastically. It made a huge difference in 12. And I think a lot of times what we try and tell the youth group, hey, we're not asking you to go evangelize to 5,000 people. You know, we're asking you to go to evangelize to one. And then if you can make a difference in that one person's life, now let's move on to the next one. And so, Travis, I think there's that idea of realistic goals versus, you know, we get caught on, I know growing up, I looked up to, you know, you and Travis or you and Ben, because it's like, oh, they're in front of the Maywood crew and now they're in front of CYC and all this stuff. And not to disparage you, but, you know, I look at that and go, oh, I got to preach in front of Maywood. What's the big deal? You know, It's like, can I go find one person and really make a difference? And if I can do that, now I'm really being about the mission of Jesus.
Yeah. And, you know, I sent this to you guys when we were talking about what parable we were going to look at. If you guys who are listening or watching along Luke chapter 8, it comes in after the parable of the sower. In Luke 8, he mentions this: no one lighting a lamp covers it with a container or puts it under a bed, but he puts it on a lampstand so that those who come in may see the light. And that's Luke chapter 8 and verse 16. And the heading over it in my Bible says the parable of the lamp. So, and in that, he goes on to say, for nothing is hidden that will not become evident, nor anything secret that will not be known and come to light. Now, there's probably a lot of different meanings to that and connotations to that that we could get into, and probably some of that has to do with Jesus' ministry and what it was going to do and how that was going to be broadcasted all through the world. But at the same time, I think he uses it in Matthew as like an individual statement. So you are the light of the world. The city set up on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do men light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand it gives light to all the house. And in the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good works and give glory to the Father who's in heaven. You can't cover that light up, And Travis mentioned that Jesus talks about being the light of the world. There's a theme that runs through the Gospel of John about light. It starts in John chapter 1 and verse 5 when he says, he came into the world and the world could not comprehend him. But we know that idea of that is that light couldn't be snuffed out. It couldn't be put out. It couldn't be done away with. And then he goes on all through the gospel, John 8, 12, 9, 5, 12, 36. Those are all places where it talks about Jesus as the light. And so when we let that light be in us, hey, that can't be hidden. That's going to be something that's going to be broadcasted. It's going to come out of our lives. And I don't know, how many of you guys hunt. I know Will has some. We've bow fished together and things like that. You get out on the river and you turn all the lights out. If you're out in a random place, or if you're going hunting and you're out all by yourself and you turn all the lights out, you'll find a light if there's one anywhere near. If you may be a mile away from it, but you'll see it glowing way off in the distance and go, hey, there's a light. You cannot hide it in the darkness. And so as Christians, when we allow Christ to live in us, it's going to show up and it's going to show out, as Travis, with our podcast God showing up and showing out. It does that in our lives. People see it. People will know that it's there.
I was looking at my Bible trying to find it, but I say this all the time in the scripture, that the word of God never goes out and doesn't accomplish its goal. It never comes back empty. Isaiah says it doesn't return to me empty. And we tend to think, well, I close my eyes at night and I go to sleep and I stop working. Well, God doesn't do that. Obviously, he rested after creation, but he didn't need sleep. He didn't need to rest as we need rest. He just symbolically, it's done, it's complete. But it's go back to, I believe it's 1 Corinthians 1, right? Where, I planted, Apollos watered, God gave the increase. God is the Spirit of God is not limited by us, right? There are times where the Spirit is on me and wants me, you need to do this loving thing. I don't want to do this loving thing, and if you don't do it, somebody will. And so, and I know that sometimes we may say, well, if you don't do it, someone might not. But the Spirit and God is going to be victorious. And I think a lot of times we use the excuse of coming up short. Well, what if I don't do it right? Or what if it's misconstrued? Or what if? But God is victorious. The light is not going to be buried. It's not going to be contained. It's not going to be limited by mankind. And it's certainly not going to be limited by your inabilities, right? And God knew your inabilities when he called you. It's so, I think about Samuel. They come to him, we want a king, and Samuel's mad. He's mad as a hornet, and he goes to God and goes, these people want a king, and God's like, well, why are you mad? They're not rejecting you. they're rejecting me, And so I think the Spirit is working on my heart that when people reject God, it's not anger, it's sadness. It's a this righteous grief, that man, I just wish there was I've had that conversation with people. I wish there was some way that I could convey to you. And I have lots of words and I can talk all day, but there are sometimes I just can't convey how awesome it is to know that freedom and that liberty. And that's the frustrating thing to me, is I don't know when I can't communicate that.
I think
So go ahead, Will.
Well, I was just going to say, going off what Travis said, you look at John 1, you mentioned John talks about this idea of light, but then verse 5, the light shines in the darkness and the darkness has not overcome it. Like what Travis is saying, like it's there. And even if it's just me, the darkness can't put that out, and so it's almost like with the power of God and with the Spirit, why am I not doing more? Because we all know, like fire, once it catches fire and once something catches fire, it continues to burn. If I continue to be the person that God's called me to be, I think the end of, what Jesus is saying there in Matthew 5 is people will recognize who the Father is. It's not these incredible sermons or these well thought out just thoughts. It's just being Jesus to the people that I'm around. And if I do that, then they get to know who God is. And I find so much positivity knowing that if I can just live like Jesus, people are going to come to know Jesus. And what a great thought to know. I don't have to be this intellectual scholar like, whoever. I just get to be like Jesus, and I know that people will come to know God.
Well, and I think that's a big thing too, when you start, we think about, I don't know the right way to put it, the super Christians, the people who, are always up front, who are always speaking. We could name all those guys that speak at CYC or whatever, the guys who go around and do meetings all the time. And they're amazing people. Paul was an amazing guy. Peter was an amazing guy. John was an amazing guy. But it's funny that when you read their letters, they always mention the people in the background. Paul talks about all through Romans 16.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about the people who have done amazing things in my life. And I think, Lonnie uses the phrase significant obscurity. The people who have this significance in somebody's life, and it makes a difference because of what they do for them. And that's what, the everyday Christian's got to be, is you may not ever make waves in the whole scene of the world or the church, but are you making a significant difference in the people around you? And, talking about Bryce, him here on the show with us today, most people don't see Bryce's face very often.
Good reason.
He's he's got a face for radio. No, but the thing about it is, Travis and I get our face on video a whole lot more, and unfortunately for some people, probably, but Bryce contacted us several years ago and just said, hey, I've got this talent. He didn't put it that way, but that's basically what it was. I've got this ability with a camera. And, we said, well, okay, let's try it. And, Bryce is getting to impact a lot of people because of that. And that's not your full-time job doing, Christian videos, but you do that in the work that you do, in different areas in different ways. But you use that. You're not a minister. You're not somebody hired by the church to do those things, but you're making an impact even in your business or, even in your workplace. So, how significant does a passage like this, what does it do for you, as a everyday Christian, Bryce? What do you see in this as you read it?
Something that's very easy to, you guys know this, and I mean, your line of work, I mean, it can be very easy to get burnout where it's like, I'm sure Will experienced this working with youth because I've had a very small experience with working with youth, and in a short time, I already got burnt out in the short time because it's like, you have no idea if anything coming out of your mouth is making a difference, if it's going to go anywhere, if it's going in, and a lot of times you don't get to see the other end of it. At least in my experience, it's like I can't visually see the other end of it. But something that I remembered was the church I was attending a few years ago. They did a whole series on your ministry and being able to, whatever your knack is, or whatever your talent is, find what that is and turn it into a ministry. And that stuck with me for the most part. And I think that's, little verses like this, it's like, okay, if I don't really dive into it too much, I'm not sure what it means, but I think I can connect those two, where it's really just saying, like, what's your talent? What's the little thing that you are good at that you can turn into a ministry? And luckily, God's blessed me with the opportunity to do more of that, especially right now. With all this, COVID Corona stuff happening, I've had the opportunity to connect with more churches, connect with other people, and build up people's online presence with video work. Because now we're not meeting. Now people know,
Yeah.
what to do. And not trying to talk about myself, but I had a recent experience like this where I was I don't know, counseling is not the right word, consulting a couple congregations. And the third time I went back, I'm just thinking, like, I didn't think, I was like, why am I here? One, because I felt like I wasn't providing anything valuable. And I definitely doubted myself in that. But I had a couple guys saying, like, no, like, we've done this, we've done that. So he's like, we didn't think of that. We didn't think of this. And that was a huge encouragement to know that just the little bit of things that I said that I was there actually made a difference. Because in my mind, it wasn't making any difference.
Yeah.
That's kind of a long-winded explanation.
No,
you put your number across the screen. We'll add it to.
Yeah. But I think that stands out too, as a good story for everybody else that's watching this. Is at some point, and I guess I get the opportunity to go to a lot more funerals than some people. As a minister, we attend a lot of them. And it's amazing to me all the good things that we say about someone after they're gone, and we start telling those and bragging on them. I wish a lot of times we'd said those things before they were gone, and let them know the impact they made. Because I wonder sometimes about, those that we're burying, did they know the impact that they made on people? Because once the funeral hits, people start talking about, oh, they did this and they did this. And, it's like the story of Dorcas, where they, bring the coats and they lay them there at Paul's feet, and they, tell them about all the great things that she's done. I think it's Paul that brought them to, but, laying all these things out and going, look what she did for us. She made us these things. And just a reminder that, we probably impact more people than we think. And hopefully, as we impact people with good works or good deeds, then it's something that we point back to God and say, that's not me, it's really him. And Jesus did that. John chapter 4, Peter and John going into the temple, and they heal the man who's begging, and everybody's standing in amazement of them. And they said, it really wasn't us. Let me tell you about Jesus. So I hope we take what we do and the influence that we have and go, yeah, we're a lot. We're salt, but it's really about God. So let's glorify him and what he's doing through us. So you guys got anything, closing remarks or anything that you want to add before we go?
I got two.
Okay.
First of all, Bryce, and anybody, I've been a minister for 20 years, which is insane to think, but I'll get down from preaching a sermon, doing a Bible class like this, and I'll go to bed and I'll lay there for the first 20 minutes and go, I really hope that I made some kind of sense,
Yeah.
And back before I had children and Whitney could actually listen to the sermon, you could ask her how many times I come down, and at some point on the way home, I'm like, did I make any sense whatsoever? Am I coming across? And and depends on which video, but you got plenty of evidence now. But I remember being in India and preaching a sermon, and getting done and opening up to questions, and somebody asked, how do you convert Hindus? Well, I'd never even met a Hindu. But I go to Acts 17 and I give this big long spiel about how Paul spoke to the Athenian, and all this stuff. And Swami comes up, the guy who runs the school there, stands up, this old guy, clears his throat and says into the mic, "It's the power of God."
Smack.
I muddy the waters. The beauty that I keep going back to is the Spirit of God can clear up any mud.
Yeah. Sometimes it's much more simple than we try to make it. Will, you got anything?
I mean, the only thing I got, I think what Bryce said was really spot on is, find your talent, and use it for the kingdom. Really, and we try and preach that to our teenagers. A lot of them are like, well, I don't have any money and I don't have this or that, or, whatever. Hey, you've got the ability to reach people somehow.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but you do it. Whatever, if it's a hobby that, your athletic abilities, whatever, use that and make a difference in people's lives. And so I think that, what he said kind of probably takes all of our jib jab and just really, nails it right there.
Yeah, going back to that idea of I said Acts 4 earlier. I think it's Acts 3, where it's John and Peter going into the temple, and when they said that, they said, "Silver and gold have I none, but what I have I give to you." And they healed the man, but I mean that's the same thing for us. We may not have what the world has, but what we do have is Jesus. So, Bryce, you got anything else?
Yeah, I have one more thing. I'll try to keep it quick. I'm not good at keeping stories quick, but I will try.
It's okay.
Company.
Yeah, so this wasn't a personal story, but it happened in my hometown. It's actually kind of a really cool thing, and it's based off the fact that like letting your light shine. And I think you mentioned earlier, you said something where nothing's going to stop the Spirit of God, and nothing's going to stop anything. No human's going to get in the way. So that being said, here's how it went. There was at my old high school, there was a person that had a art display that had a few things that the school didn't agree with at some art show or something. Well, they asked the student to take it down early or whatever, and the student of course got upset. Well, and because the student said, well, if I can't show this, then I don't want that picture of Jesus in the office hanging on the wall anymore. Now, the whole thing was the fact that the painting or the picture, it didn't use the word Jesus. It just said like the Good Shepherd, and it was a big deal. So it was a bunch of little small things that turned into a huge thing, where it got to a point where city council, like the whole city had to meet and discuss whether or not they're going to take this painting down in the high school office, which, by the way, is like back down the hallway that like hardly anyone sees or just goes by.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some big, I don't know what the organization is. So you guys may know, some big atheist organization or something got involved, threatened to sue the school, yada, yada, yada. Long story short, it was going to cost the school hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep this painting up. So they decided, they voted to take it down. It became national news in the small town of New Concord. And here's the best part of it all. It all started from this one student feeling offended and saying, well, I'm going to oppress you because you oppressed me. And it turned out what they decided after they took it down is there's a family that lives right in front of the high school that lives at the entrance of the high school. And the high school sign is in their yard. They decided to take the painting, turn it into like a lit statue, and put it in their front yard 10 feet from the high school sign right at the entrance of the high school. So now every single day, anybody who goes to that school sees the painting as they drive into the school.
Wow.
And it's just, I was like, I thought that was crazy. It was just like, all it took was one offended person to in a painting that wasn't even getting seen, to now every single day, everyone that goes by gets to see the painting of Jesus or the Good Shepherd. I just thought that was really neat.
And the light was not overcome. That's pretty awesome. Thanks for sharing that for sure. So I think that's all we've got for this evening. Thank you guys for tuning in and being a part of the study. And thank you guys for helping us. Bryce, thank you for being with us. And Will and Travis, of course. Earlier, I referenced, I was looking at that because I thought, I think I botched something on it. I referenced Acts chapter 9 with Dorcas or Tabitha, and it was Peter that they were bringing those to. So sorry about that. Just wanted to make sure I cleared that up. Thank you guys for being with us, and we look forward to, again, studying with you next Sunday. Who knows who will be on here with, but we'll study together again then. So you guys have a good night.